Hello and welcome to Finland.
Thank you very much.
When did you arrive?
Yesterday,
Will you be leaving?
Thursday.
Is this what your life has become?
Yes.
How many days a year you travel?
Well, it varies. Some years, maybe 30 days. Other years, maybe 60, 70 days. Nothing like a musician on tour. Even when I was on tour, I toured for 40 years with my own ensemble. Yeah. But we don't tour like a rock band tours. A week away, that's enough for me.
You need your bed.
No, I need to get back and write music.
That was something I wanted to talk with you about. The last couple of years I've been, don't take it wrong, I haven't been following you, but I've been following you. And
whatever.
Yeah. Let's not go into detail, but I have seen your calendar and I have seen your vast amount of traveling you have to do, and I've been thinking how much you have time left to do new music.
Well, if you look at my calendar, you see there's less traveling in the last few years, and more time spent at home writing. But it is a kind of tightrope.
Yeah.
In other words, I mean, some people can, write on the road. I can sometimes do a little something, but it's just a little something.
What's your place like, where you write?
I have a studio that looks out on some very beautiful trees, and we're 60 miles north of New York City. We moved out of the city in 2006, and there's a bird feeder outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very, very nice place to work.
What are your tools?
Excuse me?
What are your tools? Tools to write music. What are the things you need when you write new music?
Well, I did a piano.
Yeah.
I usually work at the begin to get the harmonies basically there. I have a computer. I use a Mac portable, and I'm using software like Sibelius, which is a notation program. And I use Reason for samplers, so I can be on an airplane and have earphones in, and I can hear a mock-up, a MIDI mock-up of what I'm working on.
When you start on a new piece, how much of it happens inside your head before anything's written down?
Not a great deal. The most important thing that happens in my head is, what am I writing for? What are the instruments?
Yes.
That's a real big deal. I don't write for, I may be writing an orchestra piece, but it's not my usual way. So, for instance, my publisher called me up a couple of years ago and said, I want you to write for Eighth Blackbird. It's the name of a group. And I'd heard of them. I heard, gee, they're really good. I said, well, what's their instrumentation? He said, well, one flute, one clarinet, one cello, one piano. I said, wait a minute. I can't write. I need doubles of the same instrument so I can make them do these interlocking cannons. She said, sleep on it. So I didn't go to sleep. I started thinking about all these pieces that I had done years ago, violin phase, where a player will make recordings of themselves, basically backing tracks, right? And as a matter of fact, very famous piece, Electric Counterpoint, that was written for Pat Metheny, and Johnny Greenwood recently recorded it, is like 11 guitars, but it's not, sometimes there are 11 guitars. Yeah. Usually there's one person who pre-records the other parts and then plays live against the other. And so I said to my publisher, well, look, if these people will record a track of one flute, one clarinet, then I'll have two flutes, two clarinets, two cellos, two violins, two pianos, two percussion. I can do it.
It's your thing.
So she asked them, they said, oh, great. And they won the Pulitzer Prize, and it's a very good piece, double sextet.
That was something I saw in the Brooklyn Academy of Music last September with the...
Could be.
Piano phase, with it was the video phase version with the video screen and double drums.
Yeah, that's 1967, but the video is from a young drummer, David Kossin, who did it in about 2000. In other words, the piece was written in 1967. Yeah. He adapted it for this beautiful kind of Shiva plays piano phase, 30 years later.
But it was it became way more than just the recording of a music.
Oh yeah, no, it becomes a kind of a little video, film, theatrical presence. Because he's actually live behind a screen, playing against a film of himself behind himself. So he looks like he's, Shiva. He's got 4 arms.
Yeah, and it also faded out to the only video and faded out only the actual player playing.
Yeah. He worked it out very well. Yeah.
It looked very good. coming back to the work of composing, when you have more of, let's say, conceptual pieces, the piano phase or clapping music and things like that, how much of the idea or the mathematics or the let's try this kind of things happen before you sit down?
Well, I never use mathematics. The clapping music piece, you'll be surprised at the lack of mathematics. Clapping music began in the early 70s. My ensemble was touring. We were touring for a long time. We started touring early 70s. About middle 70s, we were playing in Belgium. And after the gig was over, the guy said, "Would you like to go out and hear some flamenco?" And I was going, "Flamenco? What country am I in?" But the guy was going to pay the bill, so we said, "Sure." So we drive off into the foggy Belgian night. We get to this restaurant. We go inside, have some drinks. And two women come out with guitars. They start playing. They're terrible. And they start singing, and they're terrible. And then they start clapping. Wow! My ensemble was a lot of percussionists, so we were really listening to the clapping. And after a few more drinks, we went out, outside, and we started improvising clapping pattern at each other. And the light bulb went on in my head. We used to travel with 2,000 pounds of loudspeakers, amplifiers, marimbas, electric organs, glockenspiel.
I read about those years. What was the caravan like when you traveled?
Exactly. Yeah. And I was one of the roadies. I was driving around in the truck. So I thought, well, what happens if the air freight doesn't come? What happens if the electricity doesn't work? That's what happens, is that you've always got your two hands. So clapping music, the basic idea said, we need a piece that we can do anywhere, anytime. And then the details took a while to do.
Yeah, but you had a magic word there, the light bulb.
Yeah, the light bulb's the important part, yeah.
Yeah, it was an idea first and then it became music.
Exactly.
I think last 3 years, I've spent more time with this than my kids. Because I listen to it when I'm working, and when I'm working, I'm not with my kids, so it's been hundreds and hundreds of years of this.
Well, I hope your kids will forgive you.
They love it too.
Oh, good.
They've learned to love it too. Please tell me about it.
About what? Clapping music?
The music for 80 musicians.
Oh, music for 80 musicians. Oh, well, that's a long story.
We have an hour and a half.
I'm leaving now. What can I tell you? I'm just saying there's a lot to say, and it's hard to just pull it out of a hat.
How it started?
Well, there were a number of things that I wanted to accomplish. I'd written a piece called Music for Mallet Instruments, Voices and Organ, 1973. And that was kind of the granddaddy. And what was new about that piece was that before that piece, basically I had been writing with rhythmic patterns, like that's drumming.
Yeah.
Drumming is an hour and a half, but that's the whole story.
I drumming.
I did that while I was on the telephone with somebody, and I had the speakerphone on, and I said, "Hey, that's interesting," So elaborating that, the other pieces came out of a short melodic phrase, and that phrase would then da-da-be-da-da, ba-dee-da-da-da, became violin phase. In Music for Mallet Instruments, Voices and Organs, for the first time I said, what if I introduced some harmonic change? Because before it had been one key, doubles of the same instruments, and the only changes are rhythmic. That was kind of like a very young, very extreme. You know how it is.
I see the path.
Yes, exactly. So I thought, well, hey, why don't I just, do something that people have done for hundreds of years, but I haven't done. And I really got off on it. I really thought, oh, this is great. I'd like to go further with this. And a couple of other things happened. I said, I think I want a larger group, but I don't want a conductor. And I had recently been in Ghana, in Africa, studying drumming. And one of the things I noticed was that there were a group of drummers playing. And at a certain point, they just change. And you went, well, how'd they do that? Well, the way they do that is the master drummer will play a very simple pattern. It might be something absurdly simple. It might just be just unbroken eighth notes, which he would never do normally. But what he's really doing is say, hey, heads up, we're getting ready to change. And here we go. And then they would just peel off like a bunch of fighter planes into their new pattern, and he could then improvise on top of that. So here is one of the members of the musical ensemble taking over one of the conductorial functions.
Yes.
Okay, example number 2. I also play Balinese music, Balinese gamelan.
Yeah.
And I did that first in Seattle in 1973 and then in Berkeley, California in 74 with Balinese teachers. One of the things that happens in the larger gamelans is that there are 2 drummers who sit on the floor with drums like this. They're playing them like this. And they control the tempo. So if they start to get faster, you listen and everybody gets fast. And if they begin, everybody. So again, here's another conductorial function, because the conductor is giving you the tempo. Well, no. Here the musicians are giving you the tempo.
You don't even have to see what they do. You can...
Exactly. You don't have to see, you have to hear.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to have was that the musicians could be totally just wrapped up in what they're doing, playing, hearing, and not have to follow, third button means the downbeat. So I transfer that in Music for 18 Musicians to the vibraphone player primarily. Every time the vibraphone player plays a pattern in Music for 18, and you can hear it in the recording, he's playing a line of music which has to work as a line of music, but it's also a signal. Get, set, and change.
I feel like I've seen it twice live now. I saw it Tampere last January. The young Finnish drummer conductor Santtu-Matias Rouvali led it, didn't conduct but led it. And then the second time last September in New York. And was it lots of your old friends on the stage back there?
That was my ensemble who are still alive and still working. Yes.
I was missing only one person.
Who's that?
Larry David. You all looked like Larry David, the New York actor who plays with Jerry Seinfeld and those boys.
I never watched Seinfeld, so I can't tell you if we look like Larry David or
but
not. I don't think Larry David had a beard, did he?
No, he never did.
In my ensemble, most of the people, not me, most of them have a beard.
Most of them had beards, but they also had New Balance sneakers.
Oh, well, maybe so. You're very observant.
But seeing it live, it became somehow a performance in that sense that you started to see the places where somebody gave a signal for something.
Yes.
And everything. And I've been playing this for a lot of people. Please listen to it. But I think it's almost half of it. It's when you see it live.
Any piece of music that's really a good piece of music, if the live performance isn't more moving, more meaningful to you than the record, there's something wrong with the music.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something maybe there's some tricks in the studio, but the real deal is the live performance.
The heart of the song.
And so I'm glad that you saw my ensemble do it, because that may be one of the last times that we will do it. Some of the players you may remember, I dedicated the performance to James Price, who's no longer with us.
I went and read about it, and he was the first of the original group that passed away.
Yes, that's correct. So now, happily, there are people all over the world playing the piece, and I'm very happy about that. But if you saw actually any good group, Colin Curry, who will be here, has put together a group of young guys who ripped. I mean, they are scary. I mean, they're really good. But still, the bass clarinet player, he gives another kind of a change. He lifts up his instrument and he goes like. Now, how can you change? Where do you change like that? Well, what he's saying is that you can change the chord that you're playing. You change here and I change there, and it's all right because the notes in your old chord and the notes in my new chord are very similar.
Yeah.
They overlap. So we can have a kind of overlapping of the two, and they will work harmonically because they were planned to do that. And you can have a soft edge change.
And another beautiful thing about the soft edge change was the fade-ins and fade-outs they do when they go far away from the microphone and go in, and it feels like somebody's mixing the whole piece.
They are mixing it live.
Yeah.
Every time. Well, part of, if somebody says to you, what did Miles Davis play? Do you know what Miles Davis played?
Yeah.
Tell me.
What Miles Davis played?
Give me his instrument. Tell me, what instrument did Miles Davis play?
Saxophone?
Oh, God. Boo. Miles Davis played the flugelhorn, the harmon mute, and the microphone. And if you take away any one of those three things, you won't get Miles Davis.
It doesn't work.
No, he over the years evolved that combination to get the sound he wanted. And the reason I mention that is that the microphone has become so much a part of the music that certainly all of you listen to, that how you deal with the microphone is a part of your performance. So when singers or bass clarinet players or clarinet players want to make a crescendo and a diminuendo, it's a lot easier to do that by playing, but also to just come on mic and then come off mic. So they are using that.
Is it true that you found Miles Davis before you found classical music?
No, I found the very first thing that really. I played piano lessons as a kid, but music starting in Haydn and ending in Wagner and simplified versions of that. And the music that really got to me for the first time in my life, I was 14 years old, and I heard The Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky. Igor Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, Le Sacre de Printemps. And that, my jaw fell. I mean, I thought, that's the most incredible thing I've ever heard in my life. About 2 weeks later, I heard the 5th Brandenburg Concerto of Johann Sebastian Bach. And I said, wow, because I'd never heard any music before. And the third week, I heard Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and the drummer Kenny Clarke. And I had a friend of mine who was a better piano player than I. I said, I'm the drummer. And I started to study percussion. And my teacher was Roland Koloff, who was then known as Butch Koloff, who was the best drummer around. But I didn't know it. But he was studying with Saul Goodman, and he eventually became the timpanist with the New York Philharmonic. But he could play, Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and all the 1940s and 50s drummers. So I started percussion when I was 14, and my musical life, as you know it and as I know it, really began at that point. So Stravinsky, Bach, bebop, and very shortly thereafter John Coltrane really became essential ingredients.
So basically music has been your life. It's not too much overrated. If you started at 14 and since then it's been always...
I'm an addict.
Join the club. When you started planning for the September gig at the Brooklyn Academy, how much time did it took for the old group of people to get back into the piece?
It's September of last year.
Yeah.
Everybody knew the piece very well, so what we were doing is blowing off the cobwebs.
Yeah.
So we had one rehearsal before, the day before, and then we had a dress rehearsal in the room, and we were ready to go.
Wow. And when you play in personally, do you drift off from the scene? Do you have to be very much in the music and the notes and the pattern that's happening, or is there a piece where you can start to do the invoicing and dailies, or start to think other things than just playing?
There's no improvisation in my music.
Yeah.
The only improvisation is the number of repeats, and that has limits, but the vibraphone player actually decides, okay, that's enough, and once then we change. But that's not fixed. It's fixed within, a certain... Music for 18 musicians is always between about 53 minutes and 57 minutes. But you'd be surprised, that makes a big difference with people.
Yeah.
It gives them a certain feeling of that they... What's beautiful about music for 18 musicians, it's chamber music. Chamber music, ever seen a string quartet play?
Yeah.
The first violinist will lean over the second violin, and those little bits of body movement, that is chamber music. It's like literally communicating with the players while you're playing. And that is going on with this big group of 18 musicians. People are looking at people are acting with them, and that is very satisfying to players.
There was something that was very visible with the four organs. One of the organs on the right side front, he was very, very illustrative with his playing and the way he told other people where we're going and what's happening next.
You mean Nico Muhly, who was nodding? The guy who was nodding, or the guy who was lost?
Not him.
There was a guy lost. His name was Phil Glass. And there was a name, and the guy who was nodding, and that was Nico
That was
Muley.
Nico, yeah.
Nico, yeah. He's the young guy, fantastic, very good player.
And another thing about that piece for organ was the guy with the shakers.
Yes, that was David Cosson, the one who who made that wonderful piano phase.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
And
he's a percussionist.
And the thing with me was that he played the four organs first night, and for him it's 12-13 minutes of steady shake with
More, about 16.
16 minutes of steady shake with very heavy shakers.
Right.
And then the next night he did the same again.
That's right.
And then the third night he did the piano phase with the video thing.
That's right. He's a young, energetic guy.
But I still thought that the next week he couldn't lift the milk bucket.
No, David's in good health. Thank you very much. When you're playing music, it doesn't. If you're having a bad performance, the energy goes that way.
Yeah.
But if you're having a good performance, even if you say the music is going the energy is going like that.
That's how it felt. It didn't feel like there was something he had to do.
He's not working. He's playing.
Yeah. Can I ask about your and Phil's relationship?
No.
No. Okay. It was very interesting, and that's the reason. I also thought that this kind of thing with the old folks and your old friends and everything that wouldn't happen too much often. But when I heard that Philip is also going to be there, I thought that this is something I gotta go.
I think it's very good that we did it, and I think we did it very well. And
it was very, very well set.
Yeah.
For 3 nights.
And then I played in one of his pieces.
Yeah, and then you had you played the radio rewrite and some stuff. Still
No. I mean, what you're talking about with Glass and myself.
Yeah.
He played a piece of mine.
Yeah, and you
I played
played
a piece
him,
of
yeah.
his, and that was it.
Have you done it before?
Yeah, well, he played in 4 organs back in the 1970s when I wrote it, and I played in Music and Similar Emotion back in the 60s when he wrote it.
Okay, and
We both were going back to pieces that we knew, except I remembered mine a little bit better.
yeah, did you work together back in the 70s?
Well, we played. He played a piece of mine. Actually, there's a recording of him playing 4 organs. It used to be on the Shandar label, and it became New Tone, and now somebody else is going to reissue it. It was a live performance.
Yeah.
And I played on his Music and Similar Emotion in a couple of concerts back in the 60s, and that was about it.
Do you feel like the interest for your music has been on a rise?
I'm sorry?
Has the interest to your music in the last few years, do you feel like it's been gaining more followers?
Yeah, well, if you hang around long enough, more things happen.
Yeah. Do you see any other reasons?
Well, I think a lot of people. There was a recent performance, a recent recording of Music for 18 Musicians on Harmonia Mundi, which is basically a classical early music label by a young, very together young New York ensemble called Signal. And somebody who wrote the liner notes was a guy who presented a rock series of concerts called Big Ears Festival in Kentucky. And he said a lot of the musicians on this record weren't even born when this music was written. He said, but listen to them. They're just ripping through it. And actually, Colin Curry, who you'll hear tomorrow, when I first heard Colin, I mean, Colin's in his mid-30s, I'm 78. So when I first heard him, I had 2 emotions. One of them was, oh man, this is fantastic. And the other one was, oh, to kill this guy. Because, we couldn't do that. My group couldn't do that.
So there's already people who play it better than you do.
Well, yeah, that's wonderful because they grew up. We had to kind of invent, how do you do this? They grew up 15, 16 years old. Oh yeah, sure. And then maybe a teacher played them part of the music, or they heard a record, or they played some of it. So by the time they get in their mid-20s, early 30s, they just totally on top of it. For them, what's the problem? And their playing has a kind of looseness and energy that only a young person can bring to it who's completely familiar with what they're doing. And that's a joy to watch. I mean, that's just wonderful to watch.
I think that was very, very visible with the concert I saw in Finland a year ago, because the Santtu Matias Rouvali, I think, is 23 or something. He's very, very young.
Right.
And it was very, very energetic. I've been reading some of the stuff on that happened in the music scene in the 70s and all, and then it all seems kind of intertwined, and there's a lot of overlapping with different bands and groups and stuff like that. Did you work with Talking Heads or any other pop groups, or were you mainly focused inside the classical music or your own classical music realm?
Yeah, the new, we call it new music world.
Yeah.
Right, entirely. But I mean, I do remember like in 1974, my ensemble was playing a concert, probably 6 pianos and drumming part 1, stuff like that. And at the end of the concert, we're in Queen Elizabeth Hall in London. At the end of the concert, a guy comes up, long hair, lipstick, says, "How do you do? I'm Brian Eno." I think, hey, I was the 14-year-old sitting in Birdland listening to Miles Davis. Now I'm playing and Brian Eno's listening to me. That's poetic justice. Two years later, 1986, we gave 12 years later, we're in Berlin playing the German premiere of Music for 18 Musicians, and David Bowie's there. And if you listen to Wailing Wall, you'll know what I'm talking about. And David's very open about it. I mean, we don't see each other. When the record was released, Music for 18 was released in '78, David came to the Bottom Line Club, which was then a big club. It's not much anymore. And again, we were photographed together, and he's been very supportive. Recently, I don't know, some of you heard the clapping music. There was a remix of David Bowie.
Yeah.
Love is Lost.
James Murphy.
Hello, Steve Reich.
Yeah.
And so I said, hello, James Murphy.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I do. I hadn't heard Love is Lost, and I thought, boy, you know, that's really beautifully sung. I liked the way they worked the clapping music into it. And we worked out a nice, you know, friendly financial arrangement about it. So I have a lot of respect for Bowie and the way he conducts his life.
Do you follow any other things that kind of jump off or go on from your things? Did you hear the thing that the Norwegian guys, the Reich did on Electric Counterpoint?
I don't think so, no. But what I did hear, in 2010, I was invited to go to a festival in Krakow, in Poland. And the superstar there was going to be Johnny Greenwood.
Yeah.
And I knew he was with Radiohead, and I hadn't heard their music. But I began researching him. And Johnny Greenwood went to Oxford. He was a viola major. That was his first instrument. And then I went to hear his music that he wrote for There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
And if you listen to that music, you would never say, "Hey, man, that's a rocker." No, you think, this is a guy who listens to Messiaen and stuff like, which he does. So when I went to Krakow and finally met him, and also heard this great performance of music for Electric Counterpoint, for which he had done all the backing tracks, and that's all the real work.
And he played it alone.
He played it live against his own backing tracks. So we started talking, and he's a really, really very straight-ahead guy, and really good player. And when I got home, I thought to myself, I know him, he's a great guy, I love the I've got to hear these guys' music. So I went online and I went to the site of Radiohead, and 2 songs kind of jumped out at me, and one of them was Everything in Its Right Place from Kid A, and the other one was later, Jigsaw Falling Into Place from Rainbows. And those 2 songs, basically, I took from Rainbows a lot of the harmonic movement, and from Everything in Its Right Place, the everything. Yeah. And you will hear them when you hear Radio Rewrite. Some of you will. A lot of you will say, "Well, I didn't hear Radio Rewrite." The fact of the matter is, sometimes you hear it, sometimes you don't. Because it's my piece, it's not their piece.
So Radio Rewrite will be played tomorrow in the music hall, and it's not a remix, but it's a view of Radiohead's music in a way.
It's a piece of mine that happens to steal some Radiohead.
And it took me a couple rounds to find it, but I spent a lot of time listening to Kid A and OK Computer back in the years, and it was definitely something to be fond of.
Right. Exactly.
Have you had any interaction with the techno scene and the club music scene that seems to be very, very fond of your music?
No, actually not. I got a postcard years and years ago when the techno thing was just happening from some guy in Germany, and there's a line. I have a piece called City Life.
Yeah.
and in it there's a political rally, and one guy says, "Can't take no more." So the guy wrote me a postcard that said, "Can't take no more, take no, techno." That was his postcard.
Yeah. Thank you for the message. What the Norwegian dudes did, the Roixop, they took electric counterpoint and they didn't alter the song at all. They just added drums.
Right.
And it became a complete club thing. And the last January in Finland, the other piece they played was music for pieces of wood.
With drums?
No, it was 5 guys with the pieces of wood.
Right, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Yeah,
yeah, and listening to it, back then I was mostly listening to music for 80 musicians, and then I saw the program and I don't want to hear this before. I want to hear it first time live. And maybe 3 minutes in, I think I'm listening techno. I think this is techno. And I started to play with the idea, and I started to study how it happens and everything. And my friend, who's a very good musician in Finland, Timo Kaukolampi, who plays with this band called KXP, he's been helping me out, and we've been trying. We take the MIDI out of the music for pieces of wood, and we start to replace the pieces of wood with sounds from the 808 synthesizer. And we have only the first draft version ready, and it's not human played. That's something that I miss. I want it to be from the human rhythm, but it's something we took from the notes and changed it there. And you play it on a club, and you wouldn't recognize the difference. And if you're interested, I can.
But does it work as far as you're concerned?
I think you want to hear it.
Sure. I may regret this. Now this is his piece.
Yeah.
So far, so good. Well, what you did is really, it's part of a long musical tradition. You're taking the notes and you're saying you're re-orchestrating them.
Yes.
It's as if someone takes an orchestra piece and reduces it for piano, takes piano music and substitutes, okay, well, here, this is going to be a flute line. Okay, here, this is going to be an oboe line. This is going to be a trumpet line. So, you had, this is going to be a kick drum.
Yeah.
This is going to be kind of a rattling sound. And, but you kept the notes in place. So there's a recognizable, it's recognizable, but the effect of it is totally different. And I'm delighted that you could, that my piece could move you enough, interest you enough to spend the time doing that and come up with something so very, very different.
So
hey.
It's when this idea came on 2 years ago, I didn't have a clue I could someday play it to you, so thanks to you. But the reason I wanted to do it, I was watching it in the Tampere concert in Finland, and I kind of felt ashamed dancing to it. So
Well, you could dance to yours, you know.
yeah, it was a classical music surrounding, so bouncing to it was kind of
Right.
yeah. But what we want to do with it, we want to attach MIDI recorders to the pieces of the wood, so we get the human rhythm to it. And then we want to take it all the way through. And I've been kind of trying to do the research. If I understand it correctly, it would be music that could be played on a club, but it would be classical music.
Well, you know, there's this, I think there's two distinctions. Instead of classical pop, try this: notated music and non-notated music. Now you're walking in between the line. One of the things I talked about with Johnny Greenwood was at the time that I met him, I was working on a piece called 3x5.
Yeah.
Which was 4 rock instruments. And the problem with writing for with rock instruments, electric guitars and drums and electric bass and so on, is that the people who play them in rock don't generally read music very well. They're just playing, okay, hey man, this is the way they sing. Oh yeah, okay, got it. And they teach each other by rote. I've taught my early pieces to my musicians by rote. Drumming was taught mostly to percussionists who were very good readers, because I just thought, this is faster, they'll understand it better if I play it. So when I mentioned this to Johnny Greenwood, he said, well, you know, I'll tell you the truth. I could tell you more about my bandmates driving and their cooking, but not their music reading, because they don't do much of that. So I ended up that piece, 3x5, was played by Bang on a Can, where the musicians like Mark Stewart went through the Eastman School of Music as a cellist. He can read anything you put in front of him. Then he picked up a guitar, because that was what he had fun with, and he could read on guitar. And when he came down from Eastman to New York City, he realized, hey, I can make a living because I can read on guitar.
Yeah.
Well, pretty soon Paul Simon got wind of Mark Stewart, and Paul Simon asked Mark Stewart to become his music director. So Mark Stewart is like a very, very wealthy man. He plays avant-garde music with Bang on a Can, and he's the music director for Paul Simon. And I understand a lot of other pop musicians now, because he really is a learned musician who swings.
Yeah.
Bang on a Can is that generation. You know, I'm in my 70s. They're in their 50s. And they've really got some people who have backgrounds in both sides. They're trained musicians, they read, but they have actually played rock and roll. Bryce Dessner is another one. He went through Yale School of Music, can play anything on the guitar that he reads, but he's part of the National. And he and his brother plays entirely by ear. We work together regularly. So we're getting a new generation of musicians. They can read, they have been through school, they love rock and roll, or house or electronic, whatever you want to call it, and they do it. So this is something new. It's not some, music executive deciding, let's have a crossover record. Forget that. This is actually musicians doing what they want to do.
And that does give you new ideas and new things you can do.
Well, it opens up, in other words, I wanted to write a piece for those instruments, rock instruments. And I knew to do it, I had to have people who could play them with conviction. Like any musician, you wanted to really be good on their instrument.
Yeah.
So that's where I found them. And what I realized, there's going to be more people who can do that. And if there are more people who can do that, there are going to be more people who are going to write pieces for people who can do that. And they're going to sound in between rock and, in between notated and non-notated, because they really are.
You mentioned Paul Simon. Am I imagining, or can you hear some of yourself in some of Paul Simon's work?
Absolutely not at all.
Walk, Don't Run.
I'm not even sure I could sing it.
Yeah, okay. But there's a couple Paul Simon songs, especially from the time he worked with the African drummers.
Oh yeah, that was, I did that in 1970. When did he do it?
Early 80s, I think.
Well, too late.
Yeah, but no, I mean some of your work in his music.
I don't think so. I mean, we once talked to each other about collaborating, and he had an idea, and I didn't much go for it, and I had an idea, and he didn't much go for it, and that was the end of it.
Seeing the drumming piece played live, and it's a piece.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah, and something that comes to mind when you see music like that played live, and with many of your work, have you ever witnessed something gone terribly wrong?
Absolutely. Sure. I mean, there's no music that's ever been created where you can't have a really terrible performance.
Yeah.
It's rare, but I mean, it can be people who. There are various stories I could tell you, but why bother? But yeah, I mean, it can depend on people who just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or people who are so busy doing what they're doing that they won't give anybody else a chance, and they have the possibility to just dominate the scene. Or they can just be, ill-prepared and have not rehearsed properly. But by and large, overwhelmingly, I have seen a lot of young people just doing fantastically well.
Yeah. What are the things you're gonna be playing tomorrow?
I'm only be playing clapping music myself with Colin. Colin will be playing two pieces, new pieces. Well, one very new piece called Quartet, which is just two vibes, two pianos, and then he'll be playing Sextet, which is from the 1980s, which is basically four percussion and two pianos. And then I guess it's Avanti is another group here, and they're going to do Radio Rewrite.
Ah, okay.
And I think they're going to do, someone's going to do electric counterpoint, but I don't know who. Maybe somebody knows. I don't know who. Some guitarist.
And you don't know how it's going to be played. Is it going to be played on tapes or with a lot of guitars?
Oh, it'll be played. I hope it'll be played with just one guitar and tape. I prefer it with that way.
Ah, okay.
Those pieces were written for a soloist to do like a recital piece.
Okay.
And they have a real focus and a clarity when there's one person playing against themselves, their own recordings. When you have a lot of people doing it, it's kind of a festival, but it also doesn't have the focus. It gets a little
finesse.
Yeah, it gets a little mushy.
Do you feel like that comes from the same line for you? For example, It's Gonna Rain. That the recording and the working of the recording is a really essential part of the piece.
Well, that's all there is, and It's Gonna Rain is a recording.
But for electric counterpoint.
All the counterpoint pieces.
Yeah.
Vermont counterpoint for flute, New York counterpoint for clarinet, cello counterpoint for cello, electric counterpoint for electric. They were all written for soloists. Ransom Wilson, the flutist, Richard Stoltzman, the clarinetist, Pat Metheny, the guitarist, and Maya Beisler, who used to be with Bang on a Can, as the cellist. And it was written so that they could go out and prepare the tapes, and then while they were playing a bunch of solo pieces, they could suddenly play this piece that would have a whole bunch of instruments. Later, some people at schools where they have lots of flutes or lots of guitars said, hey, we could do these things live.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really good if they're really sitting close together and they've rehearsed a lot. But very often it's just, it doesn't have that snap, It's just kind of like, okay. You get the feeling there's a bunch of parents watching their kids playing, well, there's Johnny sitting over there. And it doesn't have the kind of intensity that I had hoped for. But sometimes it can work, and who knows if it's being done that way here? The answer is wait and see.
For you, which one is, or can you separate them, performing or writing?
Oh, writing. I'm a composer. I mean, I played jazz drums when I was a kid, and I still play in. If I'm playing with an ensemble that I played with before, London Sinfonietta. Ensemble Moderne in Germany. I play music for 18 musicians, so my own ensemble. I play piano 4, that's my part. And pretty much those are the two. Either that. Clapping music is, I play the cymbal part. Yeah. So if I come into some place that I don't know anybody, I can send them the music ahead, the publisher sends the music ahead, and then we can have one rehearsal a day before, another rehearsal a day of, and, get through it, either very well or, well enough. But outside of that, that's pretty much, at this stage of the game, what my performing is limited to. When I was younger, I was playing in almost everything that when we did a concert, I was almost in every piece.
How much stuff there is in the pipes coming out?
Well, right now, I just finished one piece called Pulse for wind, strings, piano, and electric bass, which will be done originally at Carnegie Hall in November 1st of 2016. And then about a week later, it'll be done, a few days later, it'll be done in London. And then a few days later in London, there'll be a new piece called Runner, which is for the Royal Ballet and Wayne McGregor, the choreographer, and also for an American group called Signal that I mentioned before. Yeah. Which is a very rhythmic piece, which I'm very happy with, which I've got about 5.5 minutes done with, and as soon as I get done visiting Helsinki, I'll go back home and get to work on it.
Yeah. Was it your intention, or how do you feel about it? For me, it's been music for 80 musicians, but it's also some other work of yours. And when I talk with people about your music, they do the same thing. They use this as a platform for meditation, in a sense. Do you have that when you make it? Do you have stories or ideas you want to somehow illustrate?
When I close my eyes, it's black. I have no imagination whatsoever.
Do you feel like that's how you make your music? You said you don't use mathematics, but somehow do you code it?
No, I use a pencil on a paper, and then I use a computer.
Yeah.
No, I have a systematic turn of mind.
Yeah.
But I'm not a mathematician. I never introduced mathematics into my music in any way. The canon, the row, row, row your boat, the brown, row, row, row your boat down the stream, and right on merrily you got to come in. Well, basically in my music it would be we'd both start singing at the same time. You stay put, and I get a little bit faster. That's hard to do, especially with row, row, row your boat. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
let's not try.
Let's not try. No, that'd be embarrassing. But if I write a short pattern for piano, like in piano phase, and actually, what happened was this. I did It's Gonna Rain come out. Any of you know that? These are pieces for recorded speech turned into tape loops. Tape loops. At one point, there was actually physical tape, and you could record on it. You could put it in a splicing block, and you could put tape on, and you'd have this circle of physical tape. You could hold it in your hand, and you could put it on top of a tape recorder, and it would go round and round and round and round. And I had two very inexpensive Wallensack tape recorders. They were about $150 back in the 60s. And a friend of mine said, there's this fantastic black Pentecostal preacher in Union Square in San Francisco. I was living in San Francisco at the time. He said, you got to record him. And I had a Ewer battery-driven portable tape recorder. I thought that was really the greatest. It was like this big. You know? Yeah. And so I went down to the Union Square Park, and I recorded him. And he's recording about Noah and the flood, the end of the world. And when he said, they didn't believe it was going to rain, be sure. And it's going to rain. It's going to rain. And as he said that, a pigeon took off. So when I got home and I made the tape loop, you hear, it's going to rain, it's going to rain, it's going to rain. So I got a pigeon drummer free. The union didn't pay a double. So when I put these loops on, my idea was, okay, I'm going to put one loop here, one loop there, and I'm going to get this relationship. It's going to rain, 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 rain. And I just put I had a headphone with split cables, put one in one machine, one in the other, put the headphones on, press the start button, and either by chance or by divine intervention, however you want to look at it, the sound was exactly in unison in the center of my head. Now, the odds against that are very, very high. Yeah. But that's the way it was. And then slowly the sound moved over to my left ear and then down my shoulder and across the floor. Reverberation. And then finally, it's going to rain. But what I thought, wow, that's interesting. But what's really amazing is this starting in unison and sliding apart through all kinds of rational and irrational relations, and then getting to that and then coming back together again. Yeah. So that was It's Gonna Rain. And now, human, time out for the human race. That year was 1964. In 1962, 2 years before that, was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Most of you are too young to remember that. The Cuban Missile Crisis was as follows. Khrushchev was the head of Russia, and he was sending nuclear-tipped missiles from Russia to Cuba. JFK was president. JFK said to Khrushchev, if you do that, we will hydrogen bomb Moscow. Now that made a lot of Americans, including yours truly, very nervous. Russian ships kept on coming. There was an American naval blockade of Cuba. Finally, at the last minute, Khrushchev backed down and sent the ships back home, and everybody. But that nervousness of being turned into radioactive dust was hovering in the air for quite some time. So when I hear this guy talking about the end of the world, in Noah in the Bible, it is very reverberant with what's going on in the present. So that piece was done. Okay. Then another piece was done using that same technique called come out. Yeah. And when I got done with that, I thought, what am I going to do? Spend the rest of my life, making tape pieces? But it's such a great technique. Nobody could do that. Yeah. That's impossible. But it's great. I'm the second tape recorder. So I made a tape loop of this piano pattern, the piano pattern of piano phase, yeah. Put it on the machine, sat down at the piano, closed my eyes, said, here we go. Because it's very easy to play the notes. And I started in unison and just tried to get as slowly as possible 1/16th note ahead of the tape. And I found, wow, I can do it. And then I could go nuts, and I could finally get all. And doing it felt great because I'm not improvising. I know what I'm doing, yeah. And I'm not reading. I got my eyes closed. I just have to listen really hard. And then I had a friend of mine who I went to Juilliard with, and he could do it at home. And because in those days it was hard to find two pianos. We were both out of school. And finally, a mutual friend, a sculptor, asked us would we play a concert at her school in New Jersey. And a couple of pieces. One of them was going to be piano phase. And the night before, I said, Jean, could we go out and rehearse the night before with the two pianos? She said, sure. So we went out there. So Arthur sat at one piano. I said, here we go. And we could play it. I said, look, Ma, no tape. And that was really the big breakthrough, to see that you could take a technique discovered on a machine and transfer it to people and have it work. And that produced piano phase, violin phase, and eventually drumming. And after drumming, I felt, basta, enough of this. And clapping music was the first piece not to use phases.
Yeah. How do you feel about piano phase? Do you like it more played with two people or one people with two pianos?
I never heard of one person playing with two pianos until I went to Ohio a few years ago, and this kid said, "Look, I can do that." Good for you, But I mean, I think that's more like, I mean, it's a trick, It's great. I mean, I admire the people who can do it, but it's for two pianos, it's for two marimbas. There's a new recording out on Deutsche Grammophon Archive of a guy playing it against himself on harpsichord. He's a Iranian-American harpsichordist who is probably the greatest harpsichord of his generation. And there's Bach and myself on the same record, and I'm so very proud of that. And he plays it beautifully. It sounds great on harpsichord.
And I haven't heard it before, but I heard yesterday Music for Pieces of Wood played on piano too.
Oh, Jean-Pierre Hamon.
Yeah.
Yeah, he with Ligeti and Pygmy music all on the same record.
Yeah.
Yeah, very odd. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Yeah, well, it's meant for 5-tuned claves, but, there are people like you come along, and what can I do?
What we want to do, we want to find 5 different synthesizers with wood and end tables, so we can call it Music for Pieces of Wood.
Okay, sure, whatever.
The audience, does anybody have any questions?
Hello.
Hi.
I am Anna-Evelina Hänninen from Radio Classic. I have one short, very simple question. Why minimalism?
Why?
Why minimalism? Why do you compose minimalistic music and didn't choose to compose like Mahler-like big orchestral pieces? Why is minimalistic music that what you chose to do and will do?
That's a word for reporters like you and journalists and music historians. If I hear a young composer say that, I say, go home and wash out your mouth with soap. because you're supposed to go home and think about the next piece you're going to write. And I'm 78 years old, and I'm still worrying about the next piece I'm going to write, and I'm really nervous. So I'll give you another illustration. Are you ready to go to Paris with me? You got your bag packed? You got a shovel? Put your shovel in the bag. Okay, you ready? Okay, here we go. Okay, we landed at Paris. Now we're going to go to the graveyard of Claude Debussy. Ready? Okay. Here we are at the graveyard. Okay, got your shovel? We're down to the grave now.
Excusez-moi, monsieur. Est-ce que vous impressionniste?
mad.
The next one.
My name is Tuomo Raini. I'm a visual artist, and I'm interested to hear what's your most important non-musical influences. And then I have another question. I have another question. I would just put it in a...
I'm very slow, one at a time. And then no, let him have the mic. He's got another question. Influences. Well, like I said before to him, when I heard The Rite of Spring, my jaw fell. And I think without hearing, I think that day I decided, I got to do that too. I mean, not be The Rite of Spring, but I want to pursue that activity of writing music. And then hearing The Fifth of Brandenburg by Johann Sebastian Bach furthered my enthusiasm. And then hearing Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and the drummer Kenny Clarke, who was my hero for a long time. As I got older, I explored more contemporary music, but Bartók and Stravinsky were definitely the focus of my interest, particularly Bartók, actually. I did a lot of analysis. When I went back to the keyboard, I played the Mikrokosmos books 1 and 2, and there I discovered I knew about the modes, Dorian mode, Phrygian mode, but there I really was exposed to them. The idea of canon that we were talking about is all over the Mikrokosmos, and again, I really got clear about what that was through Bartók. When I was at Juilliard, this is 1969, 70, almost every time John Coltrane was playing in New York City at the 5 Spot, sometimes he played with Thelonious Monk, I would go down and hear him. Later I went out to the West Coast and studied with Luciano Berio, from whom I definitely got some encouragement and some insight. But what I got from Berio was that when Berio was doing electronic music, he didn't use electronically generated sound. He didn't use synthesized. He used recorded voice. He was married to this beautiful, wonderful singer, Kathy Barbarian, and the first piece of his that I heard was called Omaggio a Joyce, and what it was her reading Finnegan's Wake, which nobody can understand anyway, and then he's cutting it up in little pieces, so you really can't understand it. But it's much more engaging than hearing bloop, bleep coming out of a sine wave generator. I also heard Coltrane at that period of time. At that period of time, Coltrane was playing what became known as modal jazz. Let's translate that into simple English. What John Coltrane was doing, in particularly a piece called Africa Brass, was playing on one harmony for 16, 17 minutes. And in Africa Brass, it's the low E of the double bass, and he's playing tenor and soprano saxophone. And Eric Dolphy, the fantastic alto saxophone player and arranger who introduced the bass clarinet into jazz, for whom I stole the bass clarinet for Music for 18, arrangement. And what Coltrane demonstrated was that if you had incredible timbral variety, different kinds of tone color, Dolphy had these French horns going whoop, 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 sound like elephants coming through the jungle. If you have incredible melodic invention, Coltrane would play these gorgeous melodies and then he just screams through the instrument. And if you have incredible rhythmic complexity, you had Elvin Jones, and Elvin Jones is like 2 or 3 drummers rolled into one. If you have rhythmic complexity, melodic complexity, and timbral complexity, then you can sit around listening to E, for 16, 17 minutes and not be bored. What's your next question?
Would you like to also comment on some of influences that you got outside of the music from other culture, or someone here mathematics was mentioned, but you didn't agree with that, but are there some other influences in visual arts?
Well, I mean, I did 2 musical influences I didn't mention, which were very important. I went to Ghana to study drumming in 1970 because when I got out of Juilliard, I said to myself, where in the world, actually when I got done with Berio in 1963, I said to myself, where in the world is percussion the dominant voice in the orchestra? What's the dominant voice in our orchestra? What's the dominant voice in our orchestra?
Drums.
No, in our orchestra, symphony orchestra. What's the dominant voice? Come on! Yeah, right, strings, count on them, about over 80 of them. Well, there are two places on earth where percussion is numerically the dominant voice in the orchestra, and that's Africa and Indonesia. So I said, I have to learn. And I also discovered two books. One of them is called Studies in African Music by A.M. Jones on Oxford back in the 50s, still in print. Google digitized it. And Music in Bali by Colin McPhee. I don't know if Google got their hands on it, but Yale University Press is the publisher. And there's a lot of notation in the book, so you can really see what's going on. Non-musical influences. At the age of 16, I walked into a bookstore, and I see this guy, William Carlos Williams. I said, hey, his name reads the same forwards as backwards. So I picked up the book. It was called Patterson. And I didn't really understand what I was reading, but it really was a kind of history of America. And Williams actually was one of our great, great American poets. He went to the University of Pennsylvania, and his roommate was Ezra Pound, who was also a great, great poet and a Nazi. Artistic excellence and moral excellence do not necessarily go together. Necessarily. They may, we hope they do, we pray they do, we want them to, but they don't always happen that way. And if you don't believe me, just take a good, hard look at Richard Wagner. So Williams, I kept reading Williams's poetry, and I did set it in a piece called The Desert Music, which uses all of his poetry. When I was a student at Cornell, way back in the 50s, I read a lot of philosophy by Ludwig Wittgenstein, who I had a tremendous admiration for. He would say things like, well, don't worry about how your mind is in your body. Think about, how do you teach a child the word mind? Do you teach it to him the same way you teach him spoon? And they're both nouns. Well, what's different? Very, very provocative guy. And so I have set some of his, there's a piece I wrote called Proverb, and the text is just how small a thought it takes to fill a whole life. And that's something he wrote, and something I relate to. So.
There's a question. You.
This is a comment. I'm going to thank you for being a bridge between all kinds of different music, especially classical music and modern pop, rock, techno. And I think it's wonderful. I'm 50 and I came here. I wondered what are the other people who can come here and listen to this. And see, they are young people and they are enthusiastic about your music. I think it's marvelous because sometimes, especially in Finland, classical music is kind of opposed and it's in a castle. But I think you're a bridge between, so that young people who are enthusiastic about techno can also come to the music hall tomorrow and see and listen and feel the music. So thank you.
Thank you. That was not a question, but I appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to try to save my skin. So one additional question. What would you say to me and other people who have maybe read from the books, and Steve Reich is one of the first minimalistic composers. If you want to put it short, what would you like us to think about you? How would you describe in a couple of sentences who is Steve Reich?
Well, I hope that you will say that I wrote It's Gonna Rain in 1965 and Come Out in 1966 and Drumming in 1971 and Music for 18 in 1976 and Different Trains in 1988, and then say something intelligent and I hope positive about those pieces and that they are still played today. That's what I hope you'll write.
So you hope that we just listen to your music and not read books?
Well, I think books have a place, but I think books are most helpful when they tell you about the music. You know, how is it played? How is it put together? It may be boring for a lot of people, but for musicians, it's very interesting. I read Richard Cheruskin, and I learn a lot. He's the most learned musician on the planet. I can't even follow a lot of what he says, but I try to, and I learn. So I try to learn more about Johann Sebastian Bach because he's a very difficult musician. But you can sit in a coffee shop, you know, and you don't know from anything, and you hear ba da 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 da. You say, "Oh, that's nice," and you continue drinking your coffee. Now that's my ambition. I want to have music in, like Chuck Berry said, any old way you use it it works. I hope that's what you say.
Thank you. We just listen to your music. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we can start wrapping it up. As you said, there's up to late 80s. So how late did you travel with the own group of people as a rock band?
I was touring until 1996.
96, okay.
That was it.
And you were one of the first composers in classical field playing your own music and touring. You were.
Yeah, well, I was, and Glass was, yeah.
Since then, you have more and more have to be adapting to the thought that it's going to be other people playing your music. How do you feel about playing and listen versus listening to your own music?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. I'm 78 years old, and if the only group that played my music was Steve Reich musicians, I'd be in a bad shape.
Yeah.
The prospects of my music outliving me would be very slim. I mean, any composer who's writing music, the difference between, we were talking about this, pop and is notated music and non-notated music. Each has certain blessings, if you like. Non-notated music is the original music. There was no notation when we lived in caves. People just would sing something or, knock two sticks together or knock two rocks together. Yeah, it was original rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
and somebody else would say, hey, that's cool, or whatever they said. And then they would pick it up or they would elaborate on it. And that's how music grew. Much later, Guido d'Arezzo, showed his hand, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and we developed Western notation. There is, I think, some notation in Indonesia. There's none that I know of in Africa. There may be some in Japan. But basically, notated music, like written speech, we speak, right? Whoever learned to read before they learned to speak? Nobody. So the oral tradition is the first tradition in our development as people. And then the written one, but the written one has some advantages. The advantages are that it is there. So somebody can come along like Colin Curry, who I didn't know from I didn't even know, I'd never heard of him. And, and then I see him, just completely obliterating my own ensemble. And he's able to do that through the written page and listening to recordings. I'm sure he listened to our recordings. I'll have to ask him about that. There is the beauty of notation is that it preserves something.
Yeah.
And then it enables people in the future to recreate that. Now, when they recreate it, they may completely change it, right? and he's not alone. This is the long tradition of Brahms' variation on Haydn, and on and on and on and on. Remixes. Sometimes the remixes are better than the original, right? So this is part of the way music works. But so I personally hope that. So now at my age, it's age appropriate to be very pleased to see. Hey, wow, there are a couple hundred groups playing my music, most of whom I don't even know. That's good. So I'm very pleased about that. So to go to meet them, coach them. Hey, you're too fast. Too slow, a little bit longer values here. That's really what I end up doing. Sometimes I sit in if it's possible. And it's fine. Right now is the time for coaching and sitting in and trying to help out younger people.
I think I gotta just I want to thank you. And the January, a year and a half ago, I was coming back from the Tampere concert, and they played music for 18 as the last piece of the night. And I was coming down on a train and thinking about the piece and everything. And when I was listening to the piece, I found it from the piece that there wasn't hell, and on the way home I found also there wasn't God. So it was a good night for me, and I have to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And,
thank you all.
Thank you so much, and live long and prosper.